Hello friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model / lady writer. I'm at home in Wales today. It's remarkable. The reason for that is I've taken a week off my normal activities to finish a proposal for the book I've been writing. Those of you who've been following my story for a while will know I've been writing a BDSM memoir, and I wanted to do an update about how that has gone, specifically because I have spent the last 3 months trying to get an agent, and I have now got a literary agent for the book. So the next part of the process is him trying to find a publishing deal for the book, but having a professional on my side has made a really big difference. So I wanted to quickly talk through the process of getting a literary agent for any of you who want to follow in my footsteps or who are professional authors looking for agents yourself. Now, obviously, I do not have a comprehensive understanding of the best way to go about this. All I can really comment on is how I did it and some things I wish I'd known when I started the process. So I'm just going to talk you through it, and I will try to make some useful analytical points as we go. So when I started writing this on the very first day of January 2019, which is the year I'm recording this, I gave myself till April to write it because I thought 3 months would hopefully be long enough. Actually, I loved the process so much, and having done a synopsis previously and having written the first few chapters the year before, I finished the whole thing in about 6 weeks, the whole first draft. And everyone I knew in the writing world said to me, oh, well, writing the book's the easy bit. Just when I felt like it had been really difficult, and I was very impressive for having written 100,000 words of anything. And I thought, well, I don't see how that can possibly be the case. Writing it was a considerable effort. The way I got through doing it, when I have rather more than full-time job already as a model and a property investor, and also helping my husband run his company, and also running my own custom video company, the way I managed to write this book was by staying up when I would normally be asleep and writing at night. So I wrote a lot of it late at night, I wrote a lot of it in the middle of the night, and I wrote a fair amount of it very early in the morning because I found the process very exciting. So I thought, how hard can it possibly be to do the next thing? Which, as far as I could see, was just send out a standard letter to 50 agents and get representation and then have a publishing deal. I was very naive, as I guess a lot of us are when we've not done something before. So the first thing I discovered as soon as I started visiting agents' websites was that I had no idea who the big players in the industry were, how to apply to an agency. I really had no idea what I was doing. Now, I thought I'd have a big advantage because my sister, Imogen Howson, is a novelist. So I thought, very naively, that I could basically just ask her to write me a query letter, which then I could send to everyone. And she very quickly disabused me of this fact because non-fiction is treated entirely differently from fiction. So the first thing I realised when I started visiting literary agents' websites was that a lot of them don't need you to have written the book at all. What they want is a business plan or a proposal based on you being able to demonstrate your expertise in your field, the size of your platform, and your ability to sell books based on your existing reputation. I wasn't expecting to have to make a business plan, and I realised I didn't want to. I had no idea how to. So the first thing I did was I ignored that instruction from a lot of the agents, and I just applied to agents who didn't ask for that because it just sounded too hard. And I also felt that memoir was a quite difficult genre in that it slightly straddles the two areas in publishing, the fiction and non-fiction, because although it is non-fiction, it's narrative non-fiction, it reads like a story. And so writing a business plan about my expertise as a fetish model just felt like a very elliptical way to impress anyone with my book. I quickly realised, having visited some literary agents' websites, that a form letter that I sent out to everyone wasn't going to cut it. All of them wanted different information. Some of them were very prescriptive. They'd say 1 paragraph about yourself, 1 paragraph about your book, 1 paragraph about your platform. And I realised that I was going to have to write a different letter to every agent I applied to. Not only that, but they didn't want to see manuscripts or even part of manuscripts in a lot of situations. What they wanted was a chapter by chapter synopsis. Now, it turned out writing a synopsis for me was way harder than writing the book because I had to make each chapter into a couple of paragraphs. It felt as I did it that I was stripping all the life out of the book in doing so. The synopsis compared to the manuscript seemed incredibly flat and dull and boring, and I realise now that probably getting some professional help regarding writing the query letter and the synopsis would have been a great plan, because as the process went on I got better and my synopsis got better until the point it was good enough to attract people enough to request the manuscript, but it was quite a slow process getting to that point. The other thing I discovered was that everyone wanted me to send the first 3 chapters. If they wanted anything, and a lot of them didn't even want a writing sample, they just wanted a query letter and synopsis, but if they did want to see a sample of the writing, it was the first 3 chapters. And as it happens, because my book is a BDSM memoir, but I'm telling the story in at least somewhat chronological order, the first 3 chapters don't really have any BDSM in them. So although I've worked hard on them and I think they're good chapters, they don't really contain the heart of my story. And I certainly wished that I had maybe written my first 3 chapters with the knowledge that it was going to be sent off to agents without the support of the rest of the book. So I think if I were writing a book from scratch again, I would certainly think of the first 3 chapters in a different way, knowing that they would be being sent off without the context of the rest of the story. So now I've struggled with this. I want to tell you how many agents I applied to before I got one, but my pride won't allow me to do that until I've got a publishing deal. So I promise I will tell you in the future. I just can't do it now. But it was more than 10. I'd hoped that 10 would maybe be enough. I'd set myself a limit of 50 because I thought if 50 agents all rejected it, it was probably not a very commercial prospect. But 10 was not enough. I think there were 2 main reasons. The first is that my query letters weren't good enough. I don't think they were professional enough, I don't think they were engaging enough, and I don't think they were attention grabbing. Secondly, and this one is probably a very important bit of advice that I would love to give to you if you are about to start looking for an agent yourself, is because I didn't know where to start, I started with the agents who came up first in Google searches, and that meant that the first 10 agents I applied to were all in Manhattan, and they were all very big agencies. Now, this presents a couple of problems. Firstly, I'm British, and it turns out that agents seem to prefer to represent authors who live in the same country as them for various perfectly sensible reasons, but ones that I wasn't aware of. Secondly, it meant that I was applying to the very agents that are probably most oversubscribed, because probably lots of authors were doing the same thing as me. Thirdly, it meant that I practiced my submissions procedure with some of the agents who would be most discerning. I think you might have a chance with a smaller, quieter agency if your pitch isn't fabulously polished, but you probably won't have much chance when in your first couple of submissions if you are sending it to really big agencies. And lastly, something which I did not think of at all, but I'm now pretty convinced it's true, is that a lot of the bigger agencies have a lot of agents. Some of them have offices in multiple cities, in multiple countries, and they might have 30 or 40 agents working within the organisation. The vast majority of the agents' websites I visited, they told you that you could only apply to one agent at the agency, and if that agent said no, it was a rejection by the entire agency. The reason they cited was that if they looked at your manuscript and didn't personally want to represent it, they would of course share it with the rest of the agents in their organisation. In practice, I am of the opinion that that probably almost never happens. I think because agents are so inundated with manuscripts, they don't do that. Also, I think in the big agencies, I can imagine, especially the ones who cover multiple cities, I'm not sure if the agents really know each other well enough to do that. And certainly in my submissions process, I never received a response from a different agent from the one I'd originally contacted, which makes me think they probably don't pass manuscripts around very much. And it means that by starting with the biggest agencies when I started writing my query letters, I was not only killing my chances with individual agents, I was shutting down my chances with maybe 40 agents at a time, because having sent them my beginner's query letter and beginner's synopsis, I made it impossible to resubmit the same work to them in the future when it was more polished. So I would definitely recommend, if you go through this process, don't send your first few queries to the biggest agents in the business. And it seems to have worked out absolutely fine because I've got an agent now, but it wasn't a great choice. I also think that it was quite easy in the early stages to try to find reasons to send my manuscript to agents. So to begin with, anyone who said they represented narrative non-fiction, I thought that was a good enough reason to target them for a query letter. As the process went on, I realised that that probably wasn't a compelling enough reason, so I started looking for agents who specifically were asking for memoir, or memoir from women, or memoir that covered sexuality. What I did discover in the process was that an awful lot of agents say they are looking for a new, different, underrepresented voice, which made me think, well, clearly they're going to definitely want my BDSM memoir, because people who work in any way within the porn industry are treated with quite a lot of suspicion by our society, and there aren't a whole load of books written by people within my industry. I also thought that as a female submissive who's also a feminist, I would have a good chance with an agent who was specifically interested in work by women, feminism, issues of sexuality. But I started to realise that what I thought of as feminist wasn't the same as what they thought of as feminist, and I don't believe that any of the agents who said they were interested in feminist work about underrepresented groups, I don't think I got a favourable response from any of them. So 10 applications went by before anyone had even asked to read my partial manuscript, which was a bit of a nasty shock at the time, but at least it meant that my manuscript wasn't being rejected on the quality of the writing, it was being rejected on the entire premise. And then I realised perhaps it was being rejected on the quality of the query letter. So now when I look back at my query letters from the beginning to the end of this process, I've seen a remarkable change of tone as they went on. They started off as very dignified, very like a country solicitor, describing my project, asking if they'd like to see partial manuscript, explaining a very little bit about myself, and saying I hope to hear from them soon. By the time I sent the letter that actually got me an agent, I was writing like someone writing headlines for a tabloid newspaper. I was using bold font. I was asking rhetorical questions. I'd resorted to hyperbole. I'd highlighted the most salacious aspects of my story in a shameful fashion. But it was this that was enough to make the agent who is now representing me at least click on my synopsis. Now, this process has been a very jagged journey, because the first 10 query letters achieved nothing except they were part of my learning experience. After that, I did start getting requests for the first 3 chapters. 2 agencies requested the full manuscript, and then both rejected it. The highs and lows of having a professional say, I will give up the amount of time it will take to read your 100,000 words, send it to me. That is an amazing high. And then weeks go by and you don't hear. And I became obsessed with checking my inbox, and I started having nightmares about getting emails rejecting the manuscript, which is eventually what I got. I'd become terrified of checking my inbox as much as I was fixated with doing it. And I honestly, as a professional model who is in demand in my primary field, it was a great source of comfort that during this entire 3-month process of applying to agencies and waiting to hear from them, the thing that probably kept me sane was during that time, when I checked my inbox, there'd always be an email from a photographer wanting to book me to model, and often saying very kind things about my work. And I don't know what it's like if you're a professional author, so all your professional pride is bound up in your written work. I can only imagine how painful these rejections are. In my field, I don't really get rejections because people only contact me if they want to work with me. I don't go to castings anymore, so I've not really honestly experienced much in the way of rejection for my entire career, which has been 16 years. So it was an interesting experience, and I felt my nerves beginning to really get shredded. On the day I got the rejection from the second agent who'd requested the entire manuscript, I now realise, based on what they said, they hadn't actually read the entire manuscript, because they said that the work wasn't political enough for them, and in fact the book is quite a call to action. It's just that comes later in the book, so I don't actually think they read the whole thing, but of course when I got the rejection I thought, my god, they read all of this, they hate all of it. And I felt I was probably at the end of the road. I was away on tour in a travel lodge, and I made a video for my subscription site, just talking to the members I have on there about how I felt it was probably the end of my dream of being published with a traditional publisher. A very, very good agent last month asked me if she could read the full manuscript of my book, and I was very excited, and she's just rejected it. So I've been working on a bit more of a beefy cover letter. Oh God, I don't know what I'm doing. And I keep saying to myself, well, I'll self-publish if I can't find anyone who thinks it's commercial enough. I need a teacher to tell me I've got an A. Or at least a B. And so I think if I hadn't tried to get an agent, self-publishing wouldn't have seemed so scary, but now, having been turned down by agents, the idea of getting their approval has become awfully important in my mind. It's so hard. It makes me really appreciate how much work I get with so much ease as a model. I really just wait for people to write to me, and then I turn them down, which is, let me tell you, much nicer, because I'm trying to stay positive in public, but oh God, it's killing me. It's not killing me, that's very dramatic. Killing my pride. It's killing my pride. I like my pride, I don't want to kill it. I guess if they were saying your writing's bloody awful too, I suppose, I guess that would be even worse. Right, no one said that yet. Awesome. So I thought that evening I'll just give it one more go, and I searched online and found an agent who did seem to genuinely specialise. It was interesting that he was only the third male agent I'd applied to. It turns out that literary agents are predominantly women, and I had been a little bit nervous about sending my story to a man, given that it's about sex, at least partly about sex. It felt a bit sexual harassment to be sending it to men. For some reason it felt more comfortable sending it to women. But it is interesting that it was a man who was prepared to take it on for all the talking about feminism and underrepresented voices that a lot of the female agents have been doing. And it's also interesting to me because my entire career has been spent working with men, and so actually it turns out I am quite a lot more comfortable talking to men about the subjects in my book, because that's what I've been doing for my whole career. So having a male agent, I think in the end, has felt like a very comfortable thing. The way that getting my actual eventual agent happened was, so it was a Thursday evening when I wrote my letter to him, and it was an extremely hyperbolic letter, which I will eventually share. I don't want to now because it's got spoilers for the book. I sent him my new synopsis, and I sent him the first 3 chapters. The next day at lunchtime I got a phone call from him asking for the full manuscript. I was at work shooting, so I got the manuscript to him that evening. Over the weekend he read the whole thing, and on Monday I was driving home from my tour when I received an email from him. So I stopped in the services and didn't want to click on the email on my phone at all, because I'd felt very hopeful over the weekend because he'd been so fast to request the full manuscript. I'd learned already that the literary agency world seems to move very slowly. A lot of them were asking for 12 weeks to consider your submission, and so getting a fast response seemed remarkable. So I did have some hopes, and I was enjoying the feelings of those hopes, and I didn't want them killed again. So I sat in my car for a few minutes before I dared click on it, and it was an email from him saying that he loved it, he'd read it all over the weekend, and he wanted to talk to me the next day on the phone. I just sat in my car and I cried.
It's been so hard sending it, like, everything in my heart to agents to judge my sexuality and whether it's okay, and it's been so hard thinking that these women are reading it and thinking I'm not like a good representative of women, because I've always been really scared about that, and just to hear someone say that an acceptable story to try to get published. It just means the world. So that was a cliche. Wow. I decided to share all of it, honestly, the good bits and the bad bits, but it's been really humiliating sharing the bad bits. It's been horrible saying when people have turned it down at various stages. So thank you.
Because I think probably affirmation from a professional always means a lot, especially when you're moving into a new field. And given the extremely personal nature of my book, the acceptance of the subject matter meant an awful lot to me. I tried to be very open about the work that I do, but it's hard to push aside the sense of guilt and shame I sometimes feel about being submissive at all, about working in an industry that so many people are so judgmental about. And with the religious upbringing that I had, it's hard to shift the sense of guilt and sinfulness. So I think those are probably the reasons I was crying. But then I drove home, and the next day he called me and we had a long talk about subjects covered in the book. He said he wasn't formally offering me representation yet, but he'd like to meet. So we set up a date to meet at his office in London the following month. Unfortunately, I wasn't back in London for, I think it was about 3 weeks, so it was going to be a little while. But I felt very encouraged because I think having an agent who seems to really understand what you were trying to write makes a big difference. And hopefully an agent wouldn't take your book on unless they really understood what you were trying to write. But it was nice to feel like we were really on the same page as to what I'd been trying to do with writing it, which was to make a political statement, not just tell a nice story about sex, which is, I think, what maybe the agent who turned it down for not being political enough saw it as. So I felt really encouraged. I wished he was formally offering me representation, but I could see that it probably made sense for him to meet me first. But then 24 hours later, he emailed me and said actually he would like to formally offer me representation. And that was a splendid feeling. I was halfway through very, very painful dental surgery. I'd been sent out into the waiting room to give some more anaesthetic time to work, and I checked my phone and there was this email. And it made the rest of the surgery far more bearable. So then I had a couple of weeks to prepare for actually meeting him. And during this time, I became absolutely paranoid that he wasn't a real agent at all, and that somehow I'd found a scam, or that he didn't actually like my book at all. And so when I finally met him, I was in a state of ridiculous nerves.
I'm in North London, walking on the way from my shoot that I did this morning in Stoke Newington to where my agent's office is. I say my agent, I've not signed the contract yet. So I'm going to go and hopefully sign my contract, which will be the first big step to getting my memoir published. I'm really scared. I'm wearing this. I have no idea what normal people wear to business meetings, because in my world, when people say bring some office wear or some business wear, it means a sluttily short skirt with stocking tops showing, and I don't think that's appropriate. So I'm wearing a dress that's grey because I think it makes you look serious, very serious. I'm terrified. I'm scared that he doesn't really want my book. I'm scared that he does want my book, and once he meets me he will no longer want my book. I'm scared because I've put together a show reel of my BDSM movie work, and I'm scared he'll want to watch it while I'm in the room, which I don't want to do because I'm too shy. And I'm scared because although I am very honest about my sexuality, I don't normally bring it up with strangers. I normally drip feed information over a period of time as I get to know someone, unless it's with a fellow kinky stranger who I'm working with in BDSM production. So this is the idea of going to a very respectable address to talk to a very respectable professional about my very non-respectable life and career and sexuality. It's making me nervous.
But it was a lovely meeting. I've signed my contract, and the next thing that has to happen, which is why I've been home working, is we have to, or he has to, pitch it. That is likely to happen in October. So in this time I've been writing an overview of the book, another synopsis, a biography explaining what my qualifications are, and some marketing ideas. So that is my story so far. Of course, at this point, this is a very premature time to be talking about the achievement of getting an agent, because getting an agent doesn't mean you'll get published, but it gives me a lot more of a chance of getting published than I had before I had an agent. So I will obviously update you with the story. If you go through it yourself, I hope that some of the things I've said will be useful to you, and I will be back next month, possibly with some news, possibly with something completely unrelated to writing my book. I was going to say it's the first time in my life that a New Year's resolution really worked out, because I made a resolution to finish my book in 2019, and I have. But in 2018, my New Year's resolution was total honesty, and it was the experience of living last year with an attempt at complete honesty with everyone that probably made me capable of writing the quite brutally honest book that I have. I think if I'd written it in 2017, I'd have skirted around some difficult issues, which I am now ready to discuss in a almost unflinching way. So, thank you for listening, thank you for your support. I'm wearing a dress that I'm going to be wearing at a spanking shoot next month. I bought it specially because it's the story of a wicked institution. Bye-bye now, bye-bye.